How big a town was Republic back then?
At that time, it was 800 population, when I remember.
In Agra, there was a little bigger than that, not much.
What were the downtowns like back then?
They were pretty thriving communities. That little town we come from, they had a horn shop, a shoe shop, and a bakery, and at least 2 grocery stores, and 2 or 3 produce performers brought their cream and eggs, and post office and drug stores.
They had things at night about once a week to allure people down to the...
Free movies or things on the side of the building?
Yeah, we had 3 movies.
We had a theater, regular theater in town.
Well, we had one too, but it was kind of narrow like that, and it's down in the... Yeah, I never was in it until I was in about 6th grade.
What were your churches like back then?
We were a United Brethren, which joined with the Methodist. When I was growing up, we had a lady preacher. She moved to town there, and that poor woman she was divorced with 3 kids, and her first husband died, and her second husband was the minister, molested the oldest daughter. And the church conference helped her get away from him, and they signed her to Republic. Republic did not want her at all. And her and her 3 girls lived in a classroom in the church for a while until they got the preacher out of the parsonage, just in Depression years. And then she served that church, done a great job. She's a good preacher, as far as I know. Her youngest daughter was my next sister, older age. I thought she's a pain in the rear because she's always hanging around the house. But then they had an evangelist come in about every so often, and a guy by the name of Rundus. And that's where I was saved and baptized under Rundus. And you know, when I was young, I would have been under 10 years old, I'm sure. And when we were in Fairbury, Nebraska, we were married with a bunch of kids, and I was railroading. And I set my motor car off on a road crossing one day waiting on a train. And this pickup pulled up, this old man, big tall old man, I knew immediately who he was. And he come over and he knew me all them years later. He knew me by name. And asked if I was still faithful and all that stuff. Had a nice visit with the old man. He was farming by there. That's kind of funny. I thought that he would remember that far.
What was your family church like, Mom?
Well, we never had one in town that really my parents liked too good. But every so often there'd be a traveling one come in.
What the way she tell me, they didn't belong to a church until the Assembly of God came, and Opal got interested in Assembly of God church and belonged to that, so the rest of them went to Assembly of God. And then they didn't have, the Assembly of God wasn't in Agra, so they went over to Kensington Assembly of God after that. But she was not belonged to any official. Her kinfolks, not her parents, but her kinfolks, there was about 3 families of Crowns in that town. Most of them belonged to Church of Christ. But her dad, they attended the Methodist church.
And we went there sometimes because it was like our relatives, you know. So Mom and I often went up there.
When her folks was first met, this is stuff she told me, Bobby forgot. But they had a farm apparently, and there was a little country church outside Smith Center, north of Smith Center, United Brethren. And her folks always loved that church and loved the people so much, and they eventually moved to Smith Center. And I think he ran the power plant in Smith Center. The way
He did.
But they were United Brethren.
And when he had that for several years, that's when he moved to Agra. And he liked blacksmith, and that's what he did in Agra.
He was also an inventor.
Yes,
for holiday.
He would come home from get his thing out and run it, write it about it. He said before he'd forget it, you know. And then he would see if he could.
She said he had several patents. But
he would send it in, and several. Yeah, he had several.
She said he done that with a jet engine, and when he applied for a patent, they told him it had already been patented. Ain't that right? Mm-hmm. You remember?
I wouldn't have imagined your dad working on a jet engine.
He had a good head, and he would have me. He would tell me what to draw.
She was very fond of her dad.
I did that. If he wanted to put a little picture with what he was doing, he'd tell me what to do, and I'd make it out. Mm-hmm. I was about 5th grade, you know.
But she said she'd go down, when she got out of school, she'd go down to the blacksmith shop and sit there and visit with him. He would have made a blacksmith out of her if he'd lived a little longer.
He kept telling me he was going to teach me to use those things he had.
Dad showed me some of the tools that he made, how they were finely machined they were.
Yeah, they were.
And without all the machinist tools that we have today.
Yeah.
He showed me those pliers, those long pliers, no?
Yeah, and he made them to hang on to the piece of iron that he put in them long pliers, put in the fire to heat it.
But he also made complex things like that thresher.
He made machines and went out and used them in the summer for about maybe a month or so, you know.
Mm-hmm. They called it a Capricorn machine, which is about a thrash machine, you know, similar.
Be about the size of half of this room, wasn't it?
Well, the whole machine was about that.
My dad always told me he was going to teach me to be a blacksmith. But he never made it. And Grandpa, your dad, was quite a mechanic.
Yeah, he was considered the best in the country.
You told a story about how someone drove through town with a new car that they hadn't even seen there before.
Yeah, he was up there on the highway. Well, I don't know, I mixed up 2 stories. But this soldier and his wife come by one evening. Dad was closing up the shop to go home. He had worked all night for it. And I was there, I don't know why. But this guy come in with a big straight 8 Buick, fairly new car. And it just a banging like a rod was clear out, hang, bang, bang. And this officer, and I don't know what kind of an officer, but he said he'd been in every garage from Omaha, Nebraska, clear down there to Kansas line, and no one had time to work on it. And Dad told him he could tear it down. He said, I'll tear it down tonight, but I can't get parts till morning. It sounds like a rod. And there wasn't, in this little town, there was no motel or anything them days. But the soldier said, all right. He said, my wife will stay here with the car and I'll go on hitchhiking because I've got to be such place, such time. And if you get it fixed, you can kiss me. When he was getting this almost makes me tear up every time I think of it. But he was getting his bag out of the car to go. Now there wasn't no place for that woman to sleep except they had a room in the back for a coffee shop and a cot for them mechanics to sleep on. Dirty cot. And this poor woman alone among strange men who were going to have to stay there. But Dad said, wait a minute, let me look at something. And he was a smart man. He pulled a valve cover off of that straight 8 Buick. And one of them valve tappers that sat there and rocked like a rocket machine that controlled the valves, had come loose and backed up. They just hammered like a rod, bang, bang. And Dad adjusted that in about 30 seconds. And that engine sounded like a new engine. And that poor guy stood out there and cried. You could see how relieved he would be. And he offered Dad $20, which is a lot of money then. Of course, Dad wouldn't take it. And he took off with his wife, happy as he could be. You can imagine. The other thing I think he was talking about, this is quite a bit before, one of his buddies from childhood come back from California. And he's driving an Oldsmobile, Hydromatic Oldsmobile, pretty late car. And as far as I know, I don't know where Dad ever got his knowledge, but I've never seen a Hydromatic transmission. I was in school, and they had a ball game that night, and he tore that transmission down and tore it all apart, and there's 1 million pieces in one of them transmissions. And they went for parts. And of course, there's old kid buddies and boozers, and I come back after the ball game, probably close to 10, 11 o'clock. And they were out there, and that transmission scattered all over the garage, and Dad was trying to put it together. Well, the bearings in there went, little ball bearings fit in the race. They wasn't one piece. And he was putting them balls in that race and had a heck of a time. So I tried to help, and I couldn't do it. So I went to bed. Got up in the morning and went out there, and he was working again. And then what happened to the car? He says, oh, he took off California. They got it put together, and he went to California. And he was back a few months later. The car just working perfect. Now, where in the world Dad ever seen one of them darn transmissions, I don't know. And maybe he never seen it. Maybe he just read books or had knowledge, I don't know. But that's the way he was. He could do about anything. He had a great reputation until he got so drunk that he'd tear down the car and get drunk and might not be back for days, and lost his business and garage.
Did you think you got a lot of your mechanic?
I don't have much mechanic. I used to work on them old cars. Yeah, he had me working all the time out in the garage.
We used to work on just about everything in the house.
Yeah, everything I
And
had.
fix everything we had.
Because I didn't have money to hire anybody.
But you got it done right.
But I was out in the garage scraping grease out of pans. I think still in diapers. He always had me working.
And then you always did that with us kids too.
Hmm?
You always did that with us kids too, as long as
Did
we
I?
didn't, as long as we didn't frustrate you. Yes.